Gina, if you're still on by my watch, we are
All
prompt
right.
1 o'clock, so take it away.
All righty. Thank you. Good afternoon and good morning, everybody. My name is Gina Spatafor, Trade Show Manager for NEC. And thank you for joining us today as we review NEC video walls. Before I hand it over to our presenters, I just want to go over a few things. All lines have been muted. And if you do have any questions, feel free to use the chat and we will address those at the end. Our presenters today are Adam Sowers and Dave Arnott, Consultant Relations Managers, part of our NEC Solutions team. And with that, I'm going to kick it off to Dave.
All right, perfect. Adam, I'll actually let you introduce yourself and then I'll go from there.
And Adam, sorry.
No,
That's all
no
good.
worries. So good afternoon, everybody. I'm Adam Sowers, as Gina said, Consultant Relations Manager for the West Region with Dave Arnott, and hopefully you guys enjoy our quick webinar today. Dave?
Thanks, Adam. Yes, thank you everybody for joining us. As he said, I am Dave Arnott with NEC, the Consultant Relations Manager for the East Coast or East United States. So this is the second edition of our webinar series on video walls. All the things that you wanted to know but were afraid to ask. Kind of a play on words on the title there, but we're going to try to make this pretty quick. We'll do a 30-minute presentation. We kind of keep it interactive between me and Adam, and we're going to throw in a couple of live demos, right? So we'll do a little live TV and see how that works out. But first we'll start off. We'll just kind of review the product line that we're talking about and what we have to offer, and we'll go into a couple of different features. One being TileCut, just a new feature on our new Generation 2 series. And we'll do a live demo of that. And then after that, we'll discuss a few of the features that help us utilize our tile matrix, which you'll see allows us to combine our monitors together simply, and those can be used in conjunction with other processors, but it's a good feature to know that how that's being set up. And then we'll have Adam do a live demo of that, and then we'll just finish it off with a Q&A and a kind of and then talk about episode 3. So with that, we'll go on to the portfolio. So what we're talking about today and what we talked about last week was what we have in our portfolio from NEC. So we have 3 sizes. We have 8 displays total. These are all 24/7. They all support landscape and portrait orientation. So that's across the line. We have a 46-inch, 49-inch, and 4 models, I should say, of the 55-inch. So starting with the 46. And represented by the pictures as well, as I'm trying to kind of show the different bezel sizes. So the 46 is a 3.5 millimeter total bezel gap, right? So that's the space in between, total space inactive in between the displays. The difference in the 2 displays after that is one is 500 nits and one is 700 nits. So depending on your location, brightness, content, viewing audience, all that, you can decide which level of brightness that you need for your display. Moving from there, we have a 49-inch, and this goes down to a 1.8 millimeter total bezel. These bezels are actually even on each monitor, so they're 0.9 on each one, so they combine make 1.8 millimeter. And these, again, have 2 models, one 500 nits and 700 nits. See a pattern there. Moving on to the next, the 55-inch is the 3.5 millimeter UN 552, and then you have the UN 552V, which is the 500 nit panel. So the 552 is the 700 nit, and then the 500 nit panel. And then you get to the newest and smallest bezel, which is the UN 552S for slim, which is a 0.88 millimeter. So each monitor has a 0.44 millimeter bezel on there. So that comes in the 2 different brightness levels, and 500 nits and 700 nits. So again, that's kind of the complete lineup of what we're talking. Everything that we talk about today would be related to these displays here. So, again, to recap from episode 1, really the new features. We've been doing this for quite a few years now. So that as we go through different generations, this is the 2nd generation of the UN series. The SpectraView engine is what we discussed last week, and this really brings the ability to do factory calibration. It gives us just a better overall experience. The connectivity is a little bit different. We'll discuss some of that today, where we're doing HDMI and DisplayPort loop out to do our tile matrix capability. We've increased our HDCP support through HDMI. The high haze or low reflective front panel is across all of those displays. IPS panels for better off-angle color reproduction and uniformity. Local dimming allows us better control and contrast control on the 49 and 55. And something we'll talk about today is the full functioning control of IR, RS-232, and LAN control using when you support the LAN daisy chain. So automatic ID, we'll talk about that. The metal chassis, I think, is important, that this is a commercial display, full metal chassis. We'll talk about the UHD loop through. We have an OPS slot on these, right? So that can, so some third-party devices there, one being the NVX D80 OPS, but as well as AC-based-T or an NEC OPS computer. These are all active, support active cooling. So we're make sure we're considering ambient temperature buildups and what have you. So we do have active cooling within the displays. We have many software packages, PD comms tools, Navis Set Administrator, and also our video wall calibrator software. So just a couple of things. And then they're all standard 3-year warranties. So to go into one of the main points of today's webinar is TileCut. And what TileCut is, it's a function that allows us to adjustment of content that's based on a non-16:9 video wall. So in our example here, we're showing something in portrait, but this could just as well be in landscape. But basically what we're saying is when you're doing odd numbers, instead of doing 2/2, you're doing 1/2. Or in this case here, instead of a 2/2, you're doing 1/2. Or if you're doing 2:1 side by side, if you use standard content, you would only see left side or right side if you had activate the tile matrix function. So this is sort of being able to have a non-16:9 video clip and being able to adjust the content to fit into the window that you provided. So you can see from this example here, using tile matrix, we've got on the left a full image 16:9 in portrait, which would show perfectly fine on a 2x2 portrait video wall. If we were to take 2 of those monitors away, we would only see half the video. With TileCut, we are able to actually shift that video over and recenter it in the 2 remaining displays. With that, we have a video here, which is one of the things we do is these short 40-second videos, which you find on YouTube and our website. So with that, we're going to cut over here. I'm going to let Adam take over and explain this slide, and then we'll switch over to a live demo.
Yeah, great job, Dave, as always. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. So just a couple things that we're going to go through. So for anybody that wasn't on last week's episode, we want to make sure that you're aware of some of the settings that we're going to look at today when we go to the live demo. And I guess before I get to that, you can also pin my video so that you can see the video wall to my right in the biggest possible picture. So just keep that in mind. There's a little graphic there at the bottom that shows that. So previous episode settings, these displays are set at 300 nits and 7500 Kelvin on both displays. So what we're going to go through today is TileCut, turning it on, the adjustments, and then the limitations. So hopefully as you're watching this, you're seeing some of the content that is playing in the background. Keep in mind, as we've got this set up, this is set up as a 2x2 video wall. Even though it's only, 1/2, virtually within Tile Matrix, it thinks it's a 2x2 video wall. So display number 1 is position 1, the top display, and then display number 2 is actually position 3. So think of that entire right-hand side of a 2x2 video wall basically being ghosted. That's how we're doing what we're doing in this live demo. So with that, Dave, if you want to cut the slide. Perfect. So I'm going to let this roll through for just a second without interrupting of doing any of the menu screens. But when I change this or I turn TileCut off, you're going to see an immediate difference. This is native 16:9 content that you're currently seeing. TileCut is actively turned on right now, and it's allowing you to see that center portion of the content as it rolls through. So I am now going to go in, and we're actually going to turn TileCut back off so that you can see exactly what Dave was talking about earlier. These out of the way. Scroll through. So you immediately see that you're only catching one side of that 16:9 content. And all of us, especially in today's atmosphere, are looking for value engineering capabilities. Tile Matrix and TileCut really gives you that capability. Previously, you would have had to go back to your content manufacturer or provider. They would have had to create custom content, or you would have had to put a video wall processor at the front side of this video wall to be able to make this work the way that we're describing it. The other thing to keep in mind is with TileCut, it'll give you 1/4 of the native resolution of the panel of shift, both horizontal and vertical. So as you see it, and I'll actually just turn it back on. It's not going to play. Sorry. Sync again. All right. Anyway, so it's 1/4 of the resolution is what you're capable of shifting it both horizontal and vertical. With that, Dave, I'll give it back to you. Dave, you're on mute, buddy.
Oh, there we go.
There you are.
Things move from one window to the next, and you go into a panic. Can't find that unmute button. So thanks, Adam. Okay, great. So hopefully I think we all understand that. That was a great explanation. So what we're going to do here is we're going to switch gears now and talk about Tile Matrix, which is kind of how the wiring that is actually running from one display to the next, how we do it for NEC built in Tile Matrix. So I mentioned before that we're doing it a little bit differently on the second generation, Gen 2 of our UN series. So what we meant was in the past, all of our inputs on the left-hand side on the top of the slide would all be routed through the display port out. The new monitors, the UNs we're talking about today, actually separate that. And basically you transport display port is basically goes to display port, and also the OPS slot, if it's set to a DisplayPort output, would go through the DisplayPort, and then everything else from HDMI, DVI, the OPS, if it's set to HDMI, and the integrated media player would then output and be looped through the HDMI output. Okay, so that's sort of the beginning, and so we're just showing that again here. And the one thing that we do is each display does come with HDMI and DisplayPort cables in the box, so that we've covered those jumper cables for you. So you can see here on the example on the right hand side, external source into HDMI 1, and that's important. The loop through is supported on HDMI 1, and there's also HDMI 2. So only HDMI 1 is connected to HDMI out. So that just make sure we remember that. But if you have a question later on, please feel free to reach out to us. And then so it goes from in to out all the way through your video wall. So that's just to kind of lay the groundwork there. And so when you go in tile matrix, the second half of that is the daisy chain land part of it, right? So this is our control side. So on the control side, we have land 1 and we have land 2, or think about it as land in and land out. So from this, we will allow us to do a TCP/IP, IR, or RS-232 can be inputted into the first display, and then everything is communicated down the LAN stream. So it's either IR, RS-232, or LAN coming into the first display, and then all control protocol is then transferred over the LAN cable to the amount of displays in the wall. Now, again, this is the LAN cabling is separate in the sense that it doesn't have to follow the same path as the signal cable. So that if you had to use, let's say, a distribution amplifier to run direct runs in HDMI sense for HDCP, the LAN can just be daisy chained, right? So we can daisy chain continuously from monitor to monitor, and we can control them on all that same string. Again, this allows us then to be able to control the wall as one, right? So as Adam was showing in the first demo, he had a remote control. He was controlling both displays at the same time. So, and then one of the cool features that we've added is all these can be set up independently, manually, or you can use our auto settings. So we can auto assign the ID and IP, and basically using the sensor, and we'll talk about that, right? That's a human. It's an IR human sensing, which allows us to sense someone that's in front of the screen or ambient light, as well as the IR sensor for the remote control. So basically, if we go to monitor 1, we always start at the beginning of the chain, and that's our primary. When we go through the automatic setup, that's going to allow us to basically set the automatic chain, where that monitor will then send codes out and actually ID each monitor following the LAN chain. So in this case, it went from monitor 1, 2 to 3, looped down to the middle right monitor, moved back across, went down to 7, and all the way back. So you can see here in this example now that each one has its own individual ID with the remote control, I'm able to actually individually control them. So in this example, if I'm down here and I push the remote button down here, which is the remote ID set, and then hold that and press the number 3 monitor would actually light up with a red 3. That would mean I would have control of that display, and I could independently control that one monitor. Now, if I wanted to go back and control the wall together, I press remote set, and I press 0, and then I would be a global setting, so that I would control all the one if I wanted to change inputs or change brightness as a unit. Now, the one thing to remember in all of this is that we do not include a remote control, the IR human interface in each box, because we would then end up with a number of those that we wouldn't need. So it is a separate part number. Don't forget that it comes in our kits. But and if you're doing something custom, you need to make sure you include part number KT-RC3. Kind of a look at some screenshots for the auto ID IP. These can be found in the multi-display setting, and you can see here under auto ID IP where you hit start. And actually, after you do that, you can see where it says item ID and IP. That's actually a toggle. So you can do IP and ID together. You can do ID only, IP only, so that you have complete control of which ones you're setting. So depending on how your IP structure is, if it's set for dynamic, we may not want to set that once it's been set. If we're just assigning IP addresses for calibration and we're doing them statically, then we could set both ID and IP together. So again, there's some flexibility in that, and that's for another conversation. But Once you go and set the parameters, you hit go. It will detect all the monitors. It'll decide. It understands how many monitors are in the chain, and then from there sets them each with an IT and IP address.
Hey, Dave.
Yes.
I want to interrupt you just for a second. There is a question: benefits for HDMI loop through instead of DisplayPort loop through. Do you want to address the kind of quick pros and cons of HDMI versus DisplayPort loop out?
Well, the reason that we did that is that most input devices seem to be running on HDMI. I mean, we also can use HDMI or DisplayPort. But what would happen is that a first monitor would always be on HDMI, and then the chain would be on DisplayPort. So we always had, from a control standpoint, we always had one monitor that wasn't the same as the others. The second benefit is we've got greater HDCP. We can actually support higher number of monitors in HDCP. So that would be the second one that would come to mind quickly. So kind of from a control standpoint. So you do have to run two cables in the video wall to support both. But I think the benefits of having the monitors match input from a control standpoint is a lot better. And also the HDCP being a greater on HDMI is a great advantage. And Adam, you may have something to add to that.
No, I think you absolutely covered it. I mean, the big one for me is HDCP, greater flexibility as far as the number of displays that we can hit. And then it looks like we've got another question here that popped up before you move on. Does the LAN daisy chain create a network bridge? Does every display get a layer 3 IP address on the management network, or is the first display in the chain? So I'll fill that one in. Dave, you can fill in if I get anything wrong. So there is actually an input and an output of every display. So when you go in and do the auto ID, auto IP, it's going to generate an IP address for every single display that's in the chain. You can tell it what you want that starting IP address to be, and then it's going to increase, as we all know, off the 4th octet by 1 increase per display. So each display gets its own IP address and can be really talked to via that IP address all in its own. But to the second part of the question, you can make it act as one large piece of display or one large canvas, so to speak, to where if you're tying it to a control system, you would only have to speak to the first display, and then everybody else is going to be in link to that first display. So it's not like you have to run, in my case, I've got a 1/2. I wouldn't have to run 2 network cables to talk to each one of those display elements. I could only run 1 network connection to display number 1, and I could talk to that entire wall.
Perfect. Good to go?
Yeah. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you, bud. You were on a flow.
No. I didn't know there was any more questions. I was just holding off, and I think you did a great explanation on that. On this slide here, so auto ID IP, what we're just showing here is when you push the display button on using the remote control and the sensor, you can see the information that pops up. So you can see that the monitor ID is number 2, and then the IP address for that particular monitor. So in our case, on the left-hand side, you've got, actually I can't see, but it looks like a number 2 and then a 3 here on this one here. So you can, on the right-hand side, you can see, in this case, HDMI aspect ratio and resolution. You can see in this example, we were using the option slot in our first monitor instead of HDMI. So we're using the inboard OPS in the slot for us. So, and then using the remote control again, when you push ID set, you can see this is how it lights up. So when you have global control, all are red. And then when you go to a particular monitor, when you hit control ID set number 2, only 2 would be red and the rest would go white. And then you would go and press display, and you would only be controlling the 1 display. So it's really a must-have for setup and now simple control, I guess. If you didn't have a control system and wanted to be able to control the monitor, that's kind of a crucial thing to have. And next slide. Adam, I guess I'll hand this over to you.
All right, great job, Dave. So again, just for a couple of people that have joined late, I want to make sure we're setting the groundwork of this live demo. So again, you can pin my video once we go to the live portion of it so that it's the largest picture possible. And in previous episodes, the settings that you're currently seeing behind me, a couple different things. It's 300 nits on both panels, and we're at 7,500 Kelvin. So what I've been doing in the background while Dave has been going through the other slides, I've switched content, number one. So this content is actually formatted for exactly the video wall that you're looking at, the 2/1. So keep that in mind. We've turned TileCut off. And I'm actually going to step you through what it would look like. And I've already done this to this display, but this is as simple as it would be. You would go into Auto Tile Matrix. You can hopefully see that I'm doing one horizontal monitor and two vertical monitors. I would hit activate, and it's automatically going to go out and find the other displays via that LAN cable that Dave talked about earlier. And it's going to do really the hard work for you. It'll go out and find each display. It's going to get everything set up, and it's going to give you the overall capabilities of what you're seeing live on the screen now. The other thing that I want to make sure that we show you as far as what Dave was just talking about is the independent IR control. So I've got my IR remote. As you can see, I'm only talking to display element number one. So I can do any changes that I want to do to display number one without affecting the entire wall. Or if I want to affect the entire wall, you can now see 1 and 2 are both red. So I'm now going to affect the entire wall. It doesn't matter if there's 2 displays or 16 displays. You're going to talk to each one of those display elements as one unified unit. So keep that in mind. Some great capabilities. Again, to Dave's earlier point, even if you don't have a full control system, there's a lot of flexibility you can have in just a simple IR remote. Some of the limitations of Tile Matrix that I want to make sure we cover today is we can support UHD 60. It's up to a 4x4 video wall, and it requires the current firmware. So just keep that in mind. If you're using UHD 30, we can actually support up to a 10x10 video wall with no issues whatsoever. So keep that in mind. It looks like we may have another question here. So we've already talked about that. All right, sorry. Go ahead, back to you, Dave.
Okay. I think that was our presentation for today, Adam. I think we're kind of at the wrap up and questions. Just trying to think of a couple of things, but you know, I think you can kind of take what we talked about in Tile Matrix and to kind of put it to your own applications. We only talked about having one large image on our displays, but you have other inputs, so you can see how you can toggle on and off between Tile Matrix. And the one thing that probably we didn't say is that Tile Matrix is not a global setting. It is out of the box that if you turn on Tile Matrix, it's global for all inputs, but you can change that to custom and apply that to each input. So you could have HDMI 1 with loop through be a 2x2 or 10x10 or anything in between, but then HDMI 2 could be set as a single unit. So just by switching inputs, you would then have, if you had another source on HDMI 2, it could then just be a single. So again, yeah, just wanted to add that in there, and if you want to add a couple of comments in there.
Yeah, great point, Dave, and I didn't mean to cut you off, but on that same realm of thought, keep in mind the flexibility of what we've talked about today of TileCut and Tile Matrix, and that's really what Dave and I are here for, as well as the rest of the solutions team. So if you guys have particular instances that you want to talk about, we're happy to go into great detail of those projects. and what you can and can't do. And we're happy to recommend it. If there's a need for a video wall processor, we'll absolutely tell you that that's the only way that you're going to be able to do what you're asking for. Or if there's ways to do it kind of at the lowest economical factor, and then a couple different steps, knowing the pros and cons of each one of those steps, that's really what we're here for. So keep that in mind. With that, the only other thing that I would throw out there would be next Thursday is episode 3. So we're going to use the same wall, and we're going to go through really an in-depth of both self-calibration as well as SpectraView calibration. We'll have some live demos on that as well, and really dig into those feature sets of the calibration that not only comes from the factory, but what we're able to do on board of these displays independently. And with that, Dave, I'll hand it back to you for any other topics I've missed.
No, that's fantastic. I think you just bring up a good point about video wall processing. I think Tile Matrix is such a great tool in the smaller walls, but it also is a great tool to combine with video wall processing to be able to segment a wall, right? And so, like you said, you talked about being able to have a larger wall. Maybe you could break it down into 4K blocks using Tile Matrix, and then use a video processor then to drive those together. It really can put together a pretty powerful solution that way too, and maybe save a little cost along the way, so that it kind of keeps within a budget sometimes. So with that, that's it. I want to thank everyone for their time today. Have a great Memorial Day weekend, and I guess be safe from my message for everybody, and hope to see you next Thursday at 2 p.m.
Awesome. Well, I'll just any other questions before we go? I feel like we really didn't give you guys a chance to type other questions, but we'll just give it a minute or two to see if anybody has any last minute ones. But if not, you see Dave and I's contact information there. Email, phone, reach out to us, let us know how we can help you guys. And to Dave's closing comments, have a great long weekend, and I hope everyone stays well and healthy.
Did Gina have anything that she wanted to add in?
You guys did a great job. I guess, aside from episode 3 next week, we do have some other webinars next Wednesday and also next Friday, one on projectors, and then collaboration solutions. So feel free to register for those if you haven't already. And have a great weekend and stay safe, and we'll see you on future webinars. Thank you.
All right, perfect. Thank you, everyone.